Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Language Learning Summit 2018. And here we are, another live session coming to you to talk about professional development with Nicole Naditz. Hello, Nicole, how are you?
Fine. Hi, welcome. How are you?
I'm doing great, and I am really excited that you are here with us because at the Language Learning Summit, I try to incorporate a wide range of topics, and I got lots of presentations, more than 50 or close to 60, I would say. I don't know, I lost count. But uh, sometimes when you get proposals, there are topics that do not show up. And I'm thinking, people like to learn what to do in the classroom,
Right.
techniques and ideas. But things don't stop when you're teaching in the classroom. You have to keep going with professional development. So I'm really glad you're here to tell us more about that. But please, why don't you start telling us about yourself first?
Absolutely. So actually, I'm going to, is it okay if I start sharing my screen? Because that's
Definitely,
kind of on the,
please.
thanks. Okay, no problem. Give me just a second. Get this going. And okay,
First.
absolutely. Awesome. Okay, so as you said, my name is Nicole Naditz. I am a national board certified teacher of French, and that's where my national certification is. And I have taught French for 24 years, but there was a very big change in my career path just last month, and I actually switched to a role out of the classroom. And so I am currently the program specialist for instructional technology, grades K through 12, for my school district, which has 40,000 students here in Sacramento, California. So that actually is going to tie in quite a lot into some of what I'm going to be talking about today. So I kind of come to you with a variety of experiences. Also, in my role as a classroom teacher, I started teaching in 1993, but I started giving presentations in 1999, just starting at my local conferences. So we'll talk about that also in a little bit. And I know that Paulino is going to jump in if anyone has any questions. So a little bit about my journey to where I am today, because for all of us, the path we take in life takes some unexpected turns, and it also shapes who we are and why it is that we do the things we do and how we do what we do. So I started as a learner. French is not my native language, as you can probably tell. And like many of my own students now, I started learning French in public schools here in California. And then I continued that in university and continued working on developing my French. Surprisingly to some, I never did have an opportunity to do a year abroad. It is one thing that I would have changed if I could have done things differently, but I actually always wanted university to do a year abroad. I truly could not afford the airfare and any other extra costs. So even though the university would have cost the same, I still would have had to have come up with the airfare and a few extra costs, and I really did not have the funds. So I did not get to do that. I became a teacher when I was 23, but I was still a learner. And I think that's true for a lot of us as teachers. So one of the things that really impacts and did impact my teaching was continuing to learn, never just stopping and saying, well, that's it. That's everything I need to know as a teacher now. I'm ready to, be the best teacher all the time because I have nothing left to learn. And then, as I said, I started presenting at conferences in 1999, but actually that fueled even more learning, not just because I was attending the conferences. And so I would present one or two sessions, but then I could go to many, many more sessions that were being offered while I was there. And that would give me new ideas. Meeting new people at the conferences would give me new ideas, give me new connections as well. And that became even more important and more valuable once internet became widely available, because I started teaching at a time when internet was actually not a thing yet for the civilian population. But the other reason presenting fueled more learning is even though most presenters will present on topics that they are familiar with and strategies that they have used and used successfully, when you talk to a presenter, you'll find that many of them, like myself, actually do additional reading, additional research, additional trying of new strategies that they hadn't tried yet necessarily, that are related to the topic that they're presenting on. So just the act of getting ready to present actually causes you to go and learn more. And that makes you both a better presenter and a better teacher, but it keeps you still as a learner. A fairly recent shift for me started in 2015 when I then started getting asked once in a while to be a speaker. And that's really different from being a presenter. And it was probably one of the, I don't want to say terrifying, but it was one of the most difficult shifts for me because I was very comfortable in my role as a teacher of students. And I was very comfortable in my role as a presenter, which is essentially designing learning for adults. But a speaker is something different. I actually Googled, what is a keynote? Even though I had attended many keynotes, I really wanted to do some research on, well, what makes a good keynote address different from just giving a presentation? And it is a complete shift in how you design what it is that you're going to present to your audience, and even what your goals are. So there was quite a bit of learning for me to do there. And to even be a relevant speaker, I still have to continually be learning about my base craft of education and educating others. The most recent shift, I have just started being invited to support school districts and others as a consultant. In fact, I'm doing my first official consultation as opposed to strictly PD not tomorrow, Tuesday. So that, again, requires kind of more learning. How is that different from just designing a session at a workshop? As I mentioned earlier, I'm no longer in the classroom. I am a program specialist. And in my district, what that means for me and for all of my program specialist colleagues, we specialize in a particular aspect of the curriculum. Most of my colleagues specialize in a subject area like English language arts, history, social science, and so on. I specialize in instructional technology K-12. So I have some administrative work to do, just facilitating and managing that process and making sure that teachers and students have what they need in terms of instructional technology. But a bigger part of my role, and the part that I enjoy the most, is in fact that I get to spend a large percentage of my time now presenting and empowering teachers and others in my district to really harness instructional technology in meaningful ways for themselves and also for their students. So professional development has now taken on a much greater percentage of my actual work day. And lastly, I am a believer. I think that that's really important. I think we see when teachers stop believing in themselves or stop believing in students, stop believing in the purpose and the power of education, that's when we start to see breakdowns. That's when we start to see the teachers that we hear about that are struggling to be effective, are struggling to make connections with their students, are struggling to make learning relevant for their students. Even in my role where I'm going to be working primarily with the adults in my district, it is imperative that I continue to believe in my students, because it is for them that I am supporting my colleagues in the district and my peers. And as you see throughout all of this, I am still a learner. We can't ever stop learning. So that's a big piece of the whole professional development as it is. What's really cool is because of the way we have evolved as a society, the professional development options for teachers are actually much more varied than they ever used to be. So we still have in-house and in-district, if you're in a public school district, trainings that you can go to. And what I would advise in that case is to branch out and don't limit yourself to professional development that your school or district is offering that is strictly for world language teachers. I have learned quite a bit by attending professional development for other disciplines, particularly English language arts, history, social science, and even visual and performing arts, for example, have all contributed things that have informed my practice and really given me powerful strategies that I wouldn't have considered or wouldn't have necessarily heard about otherwise. So it's really important not to limit yourself. And it's discouraging sometimes when you see a low number of sessions or programs being offered specifically to world language, but do go through the catalog and look at other opportunities, because most school districts have a professional development catalog. Another option for students is for teachers is just observation. Some of the most powerful learning we can do actually comes from taking the time to observe other practitioners and learning from what they're doing. And there are models out there that actually can give administrators some feelings of confidence and comfort in giving you release time to go observe other teachers. And one such model that I would encourage you to research is called lesson study, for example, because it's built on collaborating as a team of teachers, collaborating to write a lesson, and then observing each other teaching the lesson, and then coming back together to analyze the results of the lesson and how it looked when the first teacher taught it, learn from that, refine the lesson, have another teacher give the lesson, and they all go and observe that teacher, learn from that process, refine it again. And so one of the huge aspects of professional development that is important to making it successful is that it be collaborative in nature and kind of get us out of our classrooms and out of that sense of working in isolation. It's really hard to improve or to innovate or even to do your best work if you are constantly isolated and don't get a stream of curated kind of consciousness that can push our thinking forward. Universities near you and even cultural centers that target the cultures of the languages you teach can also be sources of professional learning for us. And obviously at a university, for example, if you are in a public school, their programs will almost automatically be pre-approved for you if you are looking for continuing ed credit. You may be fortunate enough to have a local language association, and by I mean a professional organization in this case. So California is a very big state. So we have the State Language Teachers Association, the California Language Teachers Association. But because California is so large, we actually have chapters within the state. So I am the president of the Foreign Language Association of Greater Sacramento. Take a look in your region and see, if you aren't aware already, if you happen to have a local chapter of a language association that you can join. They will provide you with information, news, and resources, and usually at least a couple of professional development opportunities each year. And they tend to be very low cost, or in our case, they are free. They are paid for with the cost of your membership. So joining our association gives you free professional development. The other thing that we have in California that is a fairly unique model is called the California Subject Matter Projects. And other states really should try to adopt this model because it's been incredibly powerful for teachers in California, not just in world languages. What they do is they receive state and federal funding that was approved via legislation to fund programs that nurture teacher leadership and actually train teachers to be trainers of other teachers specific to their content areas, and then to go and actually provide long sequences of research-based best practices professional development. So we have projects for physical education. We have them for English language arts, history, social science, and world languages, visual and performing arts, and so on. So these are really powerful models that are not only designed to deliver high quality professional development, but also to empower teachers to be part of a community of teacher leaders. And so they actually really nurture teacher leadership from within. Obviously, a lot of you know about conferences and attending conferences, but like I said at the beginning, I would really, really encourage you to also just look into conferences on either from organizations that serve K-12, such as the Association for Supervision and Curriculum Development, or if you are interested in technology, the International Society for Technology and Education, which probably has a chapter in your state and possibly even a smaller one in your region, because you can learn quite a lot when you are in a setting that isn't just focused on the subject area that you teach. And it's amazing how much you can bring back and implement in your classes, especially as world language teachers, because ultimately we teach a lot of content, meaning history. Some teachers really delve into the sciences, some really dive into the visual and performing arts. And so we, of all teachers, actually have some of the broadest opportunities to incorporate knowledge from other content areas into what we do in our language classes in order to give students really rich language learning experiences that are driven by content rather than vocabulary and grammar, and that will push their learning further. So going to conferences for other subject areas can really benefit both us in our teaching and, most importantly, our students. A new trend in professional development is called an unconference, and the picture off to the right of the screen with all the sticky notes on it kind of shows you how an unconference starts its day. Teachers actually think about what it is they'd like to learn about, and then they group all of their sticky note ideas into categories to see what themes are emerging as being really important to that group on that day. And then they've already reserved a slate of rooms in a high school, for example. And so they put up a chart and they literally build the conference schedule based on what the participants want to learn about. And they come together in these various rooms that are on the chart that you see, to talk about whatever topic is written on the sticky note. And the teachers themselves are the ones who are sharing their experiences, their knowledge, whatever it is they can do to help each other, resources, as well as contact information on that topic, so that the conference, although it's called an unconference in this case, isn't predetermined and it isn't preset. It really is based on what the group that has come together on that particular day really is motivated to learn about and explore. Obviously, one of the other things we really have to take advantage of now is social media. So we can learn anytime, anywhere. I think a lot of people watching this are actually going to be watching a recording so that they can have what's called on-demand learning, learning in your pajamas at 3 a.m. if that's what you would like to do. So you can follow LangChat. Well, you can't follow LangChat, but you can search the hashtag LangChat on Twitter to see what teachers all over the world are sharing in terms of resources, as well as to see whatever it is they talked about in the previous week. Or you can join their LangChat live when it's happening. And so that's on Thursday evenings, and I think they still do Saturday morning. But you can also on Twitter follow the thinkers that really inspire you, organizations whose work you admire, and really gain relevant resources and information in that way. Another thing I'm starting to see happen for those of us on Facebook are specific groups on Facebook, group pages dedicated to specific languages and the teaching of those languages. The oldest and most established of those is the French Teachers Group, but there are now other groups being modeled after it for Spanish, for example. And then once you find someone whose thinking really helps push you and really helps you find your creative outlet for teaching and find areas of your practice that you really want to continue to develop, definitely sign up for their blog if they have one, because they're going to keep sending you relevant content that speaks to you. And ultimately, in order to be effective, the professional development has to speak to you. So, not surprisingly, adult learners aren't really too much different from child or, teenage learners. So to make an impact for adults, the learning has to be immediately useful. One thing that we do find sometimes with adults is a little less patient than some of the children will be in the classroom. They will tune out at least as quickly, if not faster, than students and start browsing their phones for social media if the learning that's being presented has not engaged them within the first 30 seconds or so. It really is that quick. So if you're thinking of jumping into the professional development sphere, that's something to keep in mind. Your session description, if you'd like to give a session at a local conference, and I encourage you to do so. I think way too many teachers are somewhat intimidated by the thought of giving a session. And we have to remember there's always a strategy we are doing that is successful in the classroom. We do have something important to share. And even if you feel like you don't have the experience of some of the other presenters out there, every one of us had our first presentation at one point. So it just takes getting out there. And one of the things to do is in your session description, make it really clear why this session or to whom this session would be particularly useful. The learning has to be relevant. It has to be something that is it's not outdated. It's also not so pie in the sky that it's like, that's a great idea, but it's totally impossible to implement right now. So it has to be something that has meaning for your audience. It has to be engaging. One of the things I like about how Paulino set this up today is that he kept the chunks really short. Because honestly, a format in which someone talks to you for a while really is difficult to make engaging over the long period. When you're in a presentation that has, for example, live people in the room with you, physically in the room with you, you want to make sure that you're respecting how the brain works and how you can provide a really hard-hitting chunk of information first, which is right when the brain is most ready to receive it, is when you first start, actually. And then give them their own activity to do that helps them process that content. The fact that you stopped talking and gave them something to do with that content, that's going to help fix it in their brains, but it's also going to ready their brain or prepare their brain to hear the next chunk and learn the next piece. So we always, just like for our students in our classes, we have to keep it engaging. For our adult learners, learning has to be welcoming. Now, I would submit that it also needs to be welcoming to our students in K-12. And there's a couple of aspects to that. I'm going to talk about all of these in a minute, but you want your participants to feel like their presence is welcomed in the room. And that goes right along with being respectful to them. And again, I'm going to come back on and touch on these in a second. And particularly for adults, actually, in order to make a difference in their practice, professional learning actually needs to be job embedded and ongoing. That makes the conference format really tricky. The lesson study format I talked about earlier, and you can Google it. I believe it started in Japan, but it's really taking hold in the United States as well, is an example of learning that is both job embedded and ongoing. And it's the combination of those two things that really makes the learning stick, but it also makes it possible for the people involved to continue to learn more as they go through the process. So job embedded means that it's something that they need in order to do their jobs effectively, and it's really strongly connected to the primary areas of focus of their work. So it's something they're going to use when they're done attending your session or reading your blog or doing whatever you're going to do. They're actually going to use that information right away in order to be even more effective at their jobs than they already are. So we said that learning needs to be relevant and engaging. One of the aspects of that is that it be both learner and learning focused. So the topic is something that is focused on the learner as much as possible. The content is learner focused, less talk from the presenter and more active engagement from the learners. But it's also focused on learning and what best practices learning looks like, because we're talking about education here. So trying not to stray too far off the track of that. In order to be relevant, it also needs to be based on data and or data focused observations. I know sometimes people get really hung up on the idea of everything having to be some kind of huge research paper. And I don't think that's true. I think that if we are honest observers, that we learn a lot from what we observe in our own classrooms, and what we observe from the work our students provide us, and what that tells us about both how well they received and understood the lesson they had and what they need going forward. And that's what makes a lot of teachers do action research. And it often involves that exact kind of learning where you plan a lesson, you take the student work from it, you analyze that using some well-established parameters, and you use the analysis to drive your next steps. So that makes it both relevant and engaging for you. And then ongoing research, if it's available in your subject area or in your topic, looking at research will help make it more relevant and engaging for you. What's interesting about teaching, sometimes there are topics that are so new that there's not a lot of research out there yet. And I've been in that position where I'm exploring something that only a couple of people, if anyone, is writing about yet. And so the more well-versed you are in best practices and the research that supports best practices in education in general, the easier it is for you to make a case to your administration, for example, if you want to try something that's so new, it isn't even well-researched yet, but you have such a solid understanding of what best practices look like that you can actually talk about this new. At one point for me, it was standards-based grading and it was very new. And I was still able to talk about it in terms of why it matters and how it goes along with what we know about learning and assessment and what our goals are for students, for example. It has to be focused on what teachers can control and can do. And it has to be, as I said earlier, active and hands-on, because sit and get is no better for our adult learners than it is for K-12. I also think that if there's a reflective piece, that's actually really helpful, because that reflection causes you to go back to the learning, and it's that make it ongoing. So some teachers keep learning journals, but others do it in other ways. Some blog about their learning, and that helps them be reflective about it, and it kind of holds them accountable to the learning as well. But we also have to be respectful and welcoming in the sense that we truly listen to what teachers have to say. Sometimes you'll go to you might have been to a session at a conference where someone in the audience had a question or a comment or feedback, and it took the presenter by surprise or kind of took them aback, and there was this awkward moment in the room where it felt uncomfortable. Sometimes presenters are a little bit intimidated when someone in their audience seems to have a lot of knowledge on the same topic they're talking about. So one of the things we have to do is remember to be welcoming and to truly listen. Our teachers come to us with experience and expertise, and we actually need to honor that. They are not just empty buckets any more than our students are. So in order for the professional learning to have meaning to you, you want to be in an environment as well where whoever is providing the learning for you is respectful of the fact that you have experiences to share, you have expertise to share, and can respond to that in a way that is more welcoming and that is more engaging and that honors who you are and what you bring. I see in education a lot, sometimes with administrators, sometimes in professional development in general, sometimes even in a mentoring situation where you really want to be supportive of someone who's new to the field, where the person who, the administrator or the mentor, wants a teacher to jump from one end of the continuum to the other after just one professional learning experience. And that's not possible. So we have to meet teachers where they are and give them the tools to move incrementally and give them time and space to get comfortable with their new place on the continuum. And then give them the next set of tools to move incrementally again, a little bit further along the continuum. And then time and space to live there for a bit and grow there for a bit. That's when they will become ready to move to the next space on the continuum. And so that is a hugely important part of learning. And it's something to remember for yourselves if you are attending professional development or if you are struggling in some aspect of your own practice and wondering, oh my gosh, why can't I do this the way so-and-so does? You have to give yourself time and space to live in a spot in the continuum and then move just a little and then be there for a while and then move just a little more. And eventually you will find that if you look back, there will be a huge shift compared where you are now compared to where you were. But it's much more frustrating, and teachers are a lot more likely to abandon or give up the process if they expect themselves or if others expect them to go from emerging in a certain skill area all the way to innovative. So that is another aspect that I try to work really hard on, especially in the instructional technology realm where everybody's in a very different place. And it's both one of the challenges and one of the responsibilities that I have as a leader of professional learning to ensure that I can work with each person where they are and help them come out of that situation empowered to be more successful, more comfortable, more knowledgeable than perhaps they were when they got there. But I can't expect them to be a whole different person with a completely different range of skills after just a couple of things. So I think based on the number of participants, we don't have any questions right now. Am I correct, Paulino?
Yeah, that's right. But you also been so clear that I think people are really, I think we really get everything, and your visuals have been fantastic.
Oh, thanks. Had to do something for making up for it just being my voice in this case. We didn't even have live participants with us to throw in some questions to break up the voice. You know, we were talking about how important that was. So for anybody who happens to view this afterwards, if you would like to talk about this topic further, I've given you both my email and my Twitter feed, my Twitter account and my Twitter handle so that you can reach out to me. I am passionate about professional development for myself and for others. Paulino, do you perhaps have a question that came up for you?
Yeah, so have you have experiences with people who are in a isolated situation, so they don't have the support of a full district, and
Mhm.
they need to find alternative ways because maybe they are in a rural situation, they are far away
Right,
from.
that's exactly it.
So, and you mentioned a few of those, but if you could maybe comment a little more on things that they can do, that would be great.
Yeah, let's go back because this is a really common issue in world languages. There are often people who are the only language teacher of a specific language in their school. Sometimes they are the only language teacher at all in their school. Sometimes the only one in their whole region, depending on how rural or remote that region is. And in those situations, this is where the emergence of a really kind of interactive and dynamic internet has completely transformed what is possible. For example, some of those teachers can be participating this whole weekend with the summit. Um, I know you were saying at one point there were 300 people registered for this summit. They can learn anytime they want and on the topic that they want based on the schedule that was provided. And this is something that has really shifted compared to when I started teaching in 1993. Because back then you really were kind of limited to either whatever your district or school offered on whatever topics they happened to provide. And if you are the only language teacher, they certainly did not provide any language topics. Maybe your principal would let you go observe other teachers, but they might not have been in your area. Nevertheless, you could still see some strategies for encouraging student participation, for helping students work together in groups and do so productively and meaningfully. You still can get some benefit out of that. But now that we have full and developed networks on Twitter, on Facebook, Pinterest boards. And I didn't mention Pinterest, but actually there are some really amazing Pinterest boards that are very precise and focused on, really detailed aspects of the languages we teach. For example, all the way down to boards on specific vocabulary themes and all of the resources and authentic materials out there that you might use in your classes, or boards that follow music in certain languages so that when you're looking for songs that you might want to include in your programs, you could go to those Pinterest boards if you start following them and see what they're sharing. I think also that additional platforms include YouTube. We're seeing a lot more professional development, or at least opportunities to learn happening, because so many people are sharing relevant and kind of educational content on YouTube, not just for the K-12 sector, but also people talking like this is being streamed to YouTube, and there are other examples of content that you can actually see there. The other thing, though, that I would encourage, especially for teachers who are remote, is finding ways to join and or build networks so that they aren't so isolated. So it's one thing, and it's definitely valuable to start by being a passive, sometimes they call them a lurker, someone who lurks on a social, like the Lang chat feed, for example. They don't necessarily participate, but they just kind of hang out there and watch the streams and the posts come in. But ultimately, you want to start reaching out to those individuals on the blogs, in the Facebook groups, on the Pinterest boards, on Twitter, whose thinking consistently resonates with you. Reach out to them. Follow, if you're on Twitter, follow them. They will probably follow you back. You can send them a message. People are very responsive and say, hey, I really admire the work that you've been doing in this area. I'm struggling to do it in my own class. Here is the situation I have. What would you suggest? Once you follow someone on Twitter, if they follow you back, you're able to, well, actually, even if they don't follow you back, you're able to send them a message. And that in and of itself can really help reduce that feeling of isolation if you're in a situation where there really isn't a network that's physically present around you to support you. If at all possible, I actually still do recommend attending conferences, because that does give you that sense of community that the English teachers and the math teachers and the history teachers in our school already have. But we don't always get to have unless we go to a conference where all the other language teachers are. So you can do those for all languages by attending something like ACTFL, but there are also language-specific groups, even for less commonly taught languages, and they too have conferences and professional events. Also, if money is an issue, you might look into the regional conferences. So ACTFL is the national organization. But in the United States, there's another region in the Northeast Council for the Teaching of Foreign Languages. There's the Southern Conference on Language Teaching for the Southeast United States. There's the oh my gosh, Central States Foreign Language Association, and then Southwest Conference on Language Teaching, for example, and the Pacific Northwest. So those sometimes offer opportunities that might be easier and a little less expensive because you don't have to travel as far. Maybe you can even drive there depending on where it's being offered each year. But I do recommend trying to attend physical conferences, because the learning isn't just in the sessions themselves. The learning is in the contacts you make and the network that you build, which then comes with you when you're done, and you still have it when you return to your remote setting, and you still have those people that you can reach out to.
Great. And we do have a question and
Mm-hmm.
a comment from
Perfect.
some of our friends, teachers here around. And thank you for sharing your contact information there, because I think it will be important for teachers to continue the conversation with
Just
you.
like we were saying.
We do have a question from Lisa who says, I was wondering if you have the opportunity to finally travel abroad.
Oh, yes, I did. So what I did was, it became, of course, a huge goal for me. So the first year that I taught, I had not yet been abroad. But I immediately arranged, it seemed really gutsy at the time. I was 23 years old, and I immediately worked on arranging a student trip. I definitely used a very well-known and very experienced travel company, because there was no way I had the experience or expertise necessary to make sure everything was done correctly and safely. And that provided my first experience abroad. Um, I have lost count of how many times I have traveled now, but I still have a lot to do on my bucket list. But I have traveled both with students and on my own for really amazing. Oh, another really amazing learning program is to see if the embassies and cultural centers of the governments of the languages that you teach are offering any professional development things for teachers in those countries. So I have gone back to France twice on French government grants, to Quebec once on a Quebec government grant. Then I returned to Quebec for an American Association of Teachers of French conference. I've been to Belgium and France on programs I kind of designed on my own, where I actually spent time in a Belgian high school in one case and in a French high school in the other, and shadowed students. Highly recommend doing that. Because even teachers who lived abroad, most of them didn't spend time in high school abroad. So see if you can set up a thing where you can shadow students for the day and be a student. It was amazing. It's also a really good thing to do in your own schools. It will show you a lot about what students are expected to do each day. And so I arranged that for my school when we were doing our accreditation self-study a couple of years ago. 8 teachers shadowed 8 of our students, 2 in each grade, and they spent the whole day as a student doing all the assignments, participating in everything in every class, and you learn quite a lot. One of the things, sadly, that we learned is students sit too much, listen for too long, and aren't engaged often enough. And so that really informed our work going forward on what it is we wanted to try to do as a staff. But yes, in answer to your question, I did get abroad. I still wish to go to Francophone Africa, Martinique. I'd like to get to Haiti, but I have a lot of places I'd like to go.
Excellent. And we have a comment from a very experienced teacher, our friend Carissa Becky,
Oh yes,
Kika. She
yes, she's
says,
awesome.
not a
Hi, Kika.
question. Hello. And he says, not a question, but I like what you have to say about the continuum, particularly in relation to our own professional development.
Yes.
When our building began to look at standards referenced grading, we went about it slowly and deliberately. In some
Yes.
ways, we teachers were kicking and screaming, but after we did that, we were all in. And now
Hmm.
I and the rest of the World Language Department all feel very comfortable about what we are doing with our grading. And we aren't afraid to try new things because we feel supported and not pressured.
That's awesome. I'm really glad to hear that. It's actually the I was referring earlier to having my first, sorry, my cat's tail is getting in the camera. Um, I told you at least one would make an appearance. Having a consultation work starting now, and it's actually specifically on the topic of standards-based or standards-referenced grading. There's a school district that wants me to work with them as a consultant on that. And I'm having my first call with them, and the big piece out of that is you're not starting standards-based grading tomorrow. you're not starting it this year, there are pieces that you're going to put in place, and you have to start at this spot in the continuum and live in that piece for a little bit, and then you add the next piece and you live there for a bit, because learning takes time, and we as teachers don't always give ourselves permission. And we'll often talk about how we understand that for students, and yet somehow in education, administrators and even ourselves, we expect us to just suddenly take these humongous leaps that just really aren't possible. That's not the way our brains work. That's not the way professional practice works.
Great. Well, Nicole, I want to really say thank you so much for taking time on your Sunday afternoon or evening to be here with us and share this very important piece of information, because learning doesn't stop when you get your degree or your
Can't.
first job or even when you have 15 years of experience. I'm sure Kika will agree. She has
Yep.
30 years of experience and she's
Yep.
still learning and participating on conferences, both as a presenter, uh, as a
As an attendee.
as an attendee. There we
Yes.
are, and continue learning that never stops. So thank you so much for
Absolutely.
being here with us and talking about this very important topic.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. And again, I feel free to reach out, because for me, this is still ongoing learning too. So even your question is going to be good for me as well.
Great. Thank you so much. And I want to say thank you also to everyone who has been present with us at the Language Learning Summit, either live with us or throughout the week. There's still one more week coming up of talks that you can watch at your own time, recorded talks, and also some live sessions. This last week, we have several live sessions. So check out the schedule at languagelearningsummit.com and click on schedule to see what's coming up for Spanish speakers or Spanish teachers out there on Friday and Saturday, Friday the 23rd and Saturday the 23rd at 9 a.m. Central Standard Time. We have two live panels with Spanish teachers and content in Spanish. So a great way to practice and learn. And so I would say good night to Nicole and good night to everyone out there. And I'll see you all around at the rest of the Language Learning Summit. Thank you, everyone. Bye bye.
Bye.